Welcome to the Notorious Scoundrels, a Star Wars Legion podcast bringing you the latest news, general perspective, and competitive discussion.
Hello and welcome back to the Notorious Scoundrels podcast. I'm Kyle. I'm here with Tim and Jay. What's up, gentlemen?
Yo, yo, yo.
Kyle, did you hear that Lucas just declared himself your replacement permanently on the last podcast and did your outro? I don't know if you heard of that.
No, I didn't, but he's fired. I got through about half the episode so far, so I haven't got to that part yet. Yeah, no, you guys did great. I heard you. I haven't gotten to them yet, but I heard you had some spicy discussion on etiquette and stuff. So
yeah, I mean, I think my view with this has been the same since we started these podcasts like almost 4 years ago. Is just like we want a cool group and a cool community, right? We don't want to become those like really sweaty try-hard communities like Magic the Gathering or 40K. I'm like, I know, listen, before you guys any of you Magic or 40K players are listening, Kyle used to be one of them. I used to be Magic and Fantasy, so we know what we're talking about, and I'm not putting any of you down. There's some great people in those communities, but you guys know exactly what I'm talking about. Those guys that force, even though you know you lost, force you to complete the game so that they can get all their points, right? So that they can keep going especially in 40K. We don't want to be that community. We want to be cool and welcoming. And the thing with it being Star Wars is we get a lot of people that don't play a lot of tabletop games, if any. This is their first tabletop game, right? And so if we want this community to grow and we want it to be amazing, we need to kind of weed out the bad seeds and like tell them that it's not okay to be like that. And so so we talked a lot about just etiquette and being a cool player. And I think a lot of this, and I think I was thinking about this more over the week, and like I played a game in real life today, and I was really thinking, Kyle, maybe you can speak to this a little bit. There's a difference between how we play on TTS and how we play in real life, and I think to the degree where there's a lot more like, I can like zoom in and I can see like all these like exact things, and things don't move, or there's no like game state changes that could happen, because everything's locked in. And so I think some people come from the TTS only world because we've had this pandemic. They haven't played in real life tournaments, and then they come to an in real life tournament, and it's a little bit more loosey goosey in real life, for the most part. It's not as like, I feel like it's not as technically like sound of like, because in TTS you can like really like precisely do measurements, precisely do movements, and it's a little, there's some like, hey, if we both agree on it in real life, then that's what it is, sort of stuff.
I mean, the tab measure exists in TTS and it doesn't in real life.
Yeah, I mean that it allows you to. TTS is a little bit more precise. I wouldn't call real life loosey goosey so much as just like it's a little bit more dependent on playing by intent and that social contract. I would say that TTS is still very heavily dependent on that, because at the end of the day, we're not playing on a hex grid. We're not playing on a grid with squares. Like, we're talking about distances between pieces that even in TTS exist in a world with like simulated physics.
Okay,
right?
but here's an example. In TTS, I can pop up range on my units, and I can see the most minute sliver and go, that's range 3. Where in real life you're both going, oh man, I don't know that. That's really close. And there's a lot more. Maybe loosey goosey wasn't the right word, but there's a lot more like variation on what we expect. The expectations of that to be.
Right. The tools in TTS allow you to be a little bit more precise, right? You can pop a silhouette button, and the silhouettes like magically appear as cylinders above the models. You can do the tab key, which gives you exact inch measurements. You can do those range bands. which are very helpfully colored to
Yep.
allow you to be perfectly exact. But yeah, they both rely on that social contract. It's just a
Mhm.
little bit more obvious in person, because if you want to be at exactly range 3, you have to, you should say it on TTS too, but you definitely have to say it in real life, because you're dealing with a physical stick and 2 physical, plastic dudes. So yeah, it's just, any miniatures game is going to be dependent. Like at the end of the day, it's a social interaction between you and the other player.
Yeah.
And yes, it is a game of luck and skill, but it's also, you want it to be about the skill and about the luck, and not about playing gotcha with your opponent or something like that. So yeah, it's always important to just, be nice. Like, don't let your opponent do things that are illegal, right?
Yeah.
Don't help your opponent with strategy, but if there's a shot there, like where your opponent can get to range 3, and like it's obvious they can do that, and like don't make them fiddle around for 5 minutes trying to get it. Like just be like, my intent's to be at exactly range 3, put the model there, be like, okay, boom, you're exactly range 3, let's move on. So yeah, don't be a douche.
Yeah, that's all.
Yeah, it's not hard.
Nope.
At the end of the day, we're playing with little plastic space dudes, right? Little tiny plastic stormtroopers. Like, we're all nerds.
And really, like, the only thing on the line is some cool swag from AMG, and then us saying your name on a podcast or in a blog post. Like, that's it, boys.
Yeah.
That's all you're getting out of this.
Yeah, you're not gonna win a car or anything. Like,
no.
And if you did, you still shouldn't be a douche. But
yeah.
No car, I quit.
Yeah. It's just pride, people. That's it. All right. Anyway, do you have any housekeeping before we launch into our main topics, Jay?
Yeah, just we talked about it. I think it was last week or the week before, but we launched a new tool called Legion Stream. It's basically stream overlays that help all you people out there who want to do streams and want a simple way to show like command cards or victory points or battlefield cards. It's a web-based system for you guys to use, like whether you're using OBS or Streamlabs or something, and you can use that. So you can check that out at legionstream.thefifthtrooper.com. We're going to be updating that, since we launched it. A bunch of people have given me some really amazing ideas. One of them being, hey, do you have I don't see any of the skirmish cards in here. And I was like, oh yeah, that's a really good idea. So, I think skirmish cards, like somebody was asking, could we do like the full like battlefield turn 0, so you could see all the cards and then how they selected, so that you can like keep that up on a screen and like pop back and be like, well, this is how they went through everything. And so I think that's all very doable. And so I'm definitely taking notes and writing down ideas, and so that's like all our other apps, it's something we're going to keep updated, and it's completely free for you to use, for everybody to use in the community. And so I'm happy about that. And we have our other tools, Legion HQ, which is our list builder, Legion Stats, which is all the stats from tournaments that have been going on, and then also we have legionquickguide.com, which is just a quick reference tool that's basically a summary of the rules reference guide. So just another tool we're adding to the utility belt here. And again, I think I've said this 100 times, but basically everything we do is things that we want, and things that we're like, oh, what would be really useful is X. And then I'm like, yeah, let's make it happen. So so I'm excited about that. And then, as always, if you like any of the content that we produce on the blog or on the podcast, support us on Patreon, because we pay our staff, and that's how we pay them, is through the Patreon. So
yep, and check out the store where we
the store. Yep.
So if you want to support us, that's another way. You can buy your actual Legion models there.
Yep.
Clearly, you can get lots of other products there too.
Yeah, 10% off with the code SW Legion at checkout. If you're interested, anybody out there, we're always looking for blog writers. So if you want to go to our website, and if you go to the About section, there's a place to apply. And so, if you've got some cool writing examples, or you have, you don't even have to have a history of writing, frankly.
It helps. But
yeah. I mean, like, you got to be a good writer, and you need to give us examples, but you don't have to be a professional writer.
Correct. Yeah.
Hell, half of our staff, that's not their primary job. So actually, most of our staff, that's not their primary job. But yeah, if you have good ideas, and you have, and you can articulate them and write them down well, that's pretty much all you need. So, go fill out an application, and we'll see, because we're always looking for talent. And, I particularly want to put out even more blog articles. So
Yep. Yeah, and give me a heads up too if you submit that application, so that we know to look for it. So
yeah,
just
do
hit
that
me up on Discord or Facebook or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
that'd be great. All right, that's it.
Okay, well, we're going to talk today about terrain and basically how to make a competitive table.
Yes.
And then we're also going to do some hobby stuff, because we haven't talked about that in a while. So
great. I love all of this.
All right, let's talk terrain first.
All right.
So let's talk. Maybe we can get to the second part more in the hobby section, but let's talk first about just like how to arrange terrain on a table. Like, what is a good, balanced, interesting, fun Legion table look like?
Okay.
Should we start with like the official terrain guidelines? Because that is a thing, but for those that don't
probably
know. Now this is FFG's old tournament regs, so clearly at some point this could change.
Yeah.
But the official guidance for 3x6 table, the terrain should cover at least 25% of the table, no more than 35% of the table. Should include a mix of scatter terrain, line of sight blocking terrain, area terrain, and terrain of varying heights. Terrain should include a mix of heavy and light cover.
Mm-hmm.
Medium and large pieces of terrain should roughly be placed beyond range 1 of each other. So that's like the quote unquote official guidelines. And then they also have some examples in these tourney regs. The pictures on here are, well, we can talk about that, but here's the bullet point examples. 3x6 tables, 3 to 5 medium-sized line of sight blocking terrain of height 1 or lower, 1 to 3 large line of sight blocking terrain of height 2 or higher, 2 to 4 pieces of area terrain, 0 to 2 pieces of difficult area terrain, and 8 to 12 pieces of scatter terrain. Mm-hmm. That all seems pretty good. I'd probably err on the higher side of those numbers. They do have a picture in here. I will say this picture, I think everything is just a little bit too small. Like, it's got, for example, the crashed escape pod here on what appears to be classified as like a medium-sized line of sight blocker. I'd be kind of surprised if you could even, with silhouettes, successfully hide one model behind that thing now. You don't want pieces that are too big, but I would say, like, on here, the things that are shown as large line of sight blockers are essentially medium line of sight blockers. And the things that appear to be small line of sight blockers are like not line of sight blockers, if that makes sense.
The way the game has evolved, most of those things are sort of minimums, not averages.
Right.
Yeah, if you want to view it that way.
Yeah. And it's a combination of silhouettes and some of the things, how the game has kind of evolved. But generally speaking, if you're looking at these pictures, just kind of use your own judgment. There's another resource too, which is on Team Relentless's website. If you go to the terrain guidelines, and it essentially takes that quote unquote official guidance and does like a much more comprehensive, for example. And it talks about general tips and how to classify stuff. It has a much better example tables. So yeah, take a look at that also.
Yeah, and I would say one of the biggest trappings that I think we all fall into is finding that balance between theme and playable, right? And I
Yeah.
think like we want to design, I mean, listen, Star Wars has some beautiful places, right, that we all want to visit. And so, we make these beautiful tables and then you're like, oh yeah, like I mean, for example, I have a Jeddah table, the Jeddah City table that's very dense urban combat environment, not so great for vehicles. Yeah,
I played on that table at Adepticon.
yeah, I did bring it to Adepticon,
Yep.
and that was a lighter version of that table, and
Yeah.
so, but I love that urban combat feel, and it
Mhm.
looks like Jeddah City, right? So it looks
Yep.
exactly like. So you're like, oh my god, I'm playing in that, but not great for vehicles. But you have to kind of find the balance between those. And so, originally that board that Kyle played on, and I'll have pictures or something somewhere, but basically it was more dense and more square and like urban focused. And what we did was we spread it out and put the pieces like more in clumps here and there on the table and made it a little bit better for vehicles. But, I think we all fall into that. So I know you want to make a really cool looking board, and for home games, that's great. But if you're doing something at your local store or you're bringing something to a tournament, always be mindful of, if you go to the Team Relentless site, which we'll have the link in the description below, but if you go to their website and kind of look at their rules and then take all your themed terrain and try to fit it within what their guidelines that they're providing.
Yeah, there's kind of two common mistakes. Really, there's three common mistakes that I see at like conventions and especially store tournaments and stuff like that. The first one is pretty simple, and it's just like not enough terrain and not enough line of sight blockers.
Yep.
And by line of sight blockers, we mean something that is, I would say, at least 50% taller than a silhouette. Because if it's just very slightly taller than a silhouette, like anything that's above the table surface is going to be able to see over it.
I mean, often if it's like your fist or bigger, it's an LOS blocker, generally, depending on how big your fists are and stuff. But
right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, think about line of sight blockers. The second slightly related mistake I see is not enough area terrain. Legion tends to lend itself towards 3D printed terrain, which is great. All that stuff is great. But area terrain is a little bit more like you can 3D print trees and stuff like that, clearly, but it tends to be a little bit more labor intensive. Or you could just cut out pieces of felt, green felt for forests and get some trees from your local hobby store, and that's totally fine. But you don't see a lot of that. Making area terrain that looks good is a little more labor intensive than just like 3D printing a building. So you tend to see less of it. I've seen a lot of people start using, like Atlantic City was great for this, basically like crates and pallets as area terrain. You essentially just take like you could even probably 3D print one of these, but like a square pallet, right? And then you just put some loose scatter crates on top of it and you call it light area terrain. And that's a great way on just about any map biome to add some area terrain if you're missing it. And then you don't have to deal with like vegetation and other stuff that tends to be a little bit more work. So that's mistake number two. And then mistake number three is just terrain pieces that are too big. And like largish is okay, but generally speaking, you shouldn't have any one terrain piece that is more than what, 6 to 8 inches in diameter, I would say.
In that range, you probably don't want it to be reaching range 2 across.
Right. That's too big.
Yeah.
And I've definitely seen maps where, like, I mean, you have some really large pieces that essentially, once you commit to a side, you have to pick. Like you got to go around that side, and if the situation dictates that you need to go the other way, you can't, basically, and that's not good either. So you also get weird things because of. I think it's a good thing generally for the cover rules. It makes it simpler where if like you're touching a terrain piece, you ignore that terrain piece for cover purposes. But you get some weird situations where with these giant terrain pieces, I've seen like, terrain pieces that are almost range 3 in length. And you could have, one unit that's at one side of it and like shooting a unit range 3 away. and they're touching the same terrain piece, and then neither unit gets covered because there's this giant piece of terrain. So
Yep.
And like as an aside, if you sort of walk up to a table like that, or you're a TO and has a piece of terrain like that, it's often best to like at least try to cut that in half, either whether it be actually physically cut in half or just delineated in half, so that if there's two units on opposite sides of it, they still get cover. So if there's a natural, like if it's like a giant starfighter or something, like there's a table around with like a giant U-wing. My opponent and I at LVO just said like down the middle of the U-wing that separates the thing into two different starfighters. So if we're fighting on either side of it, we still get cover through it. So
yeah, please don't physically cut it in half. But
Yeah.
if there's like a good spot
but like
in there.
oftentimes when you have like 3D printed buildings or something, you'll have
Mhm.
like buildings that are actually like two different buildings that just sort of push up to each other. And in that case, you can be like, well, where they're actually physically two different pieces, those are two different pieces of terrain, even though it's like one building.
Yeah, one thing that was really cool that a TO can do that I saw Nick do this at Atlantic City is he had several like multi-part buildings. But for the multi-part buildings, he physically separated them by like 1/8 of an inch, where it was small enough that clearly like you can move across it, but wide enough where he'd be like, hey, are these supposed to be separate? And he's like, yep, those are supposed to be separate. That's why they're 1/8 of an inch apart. It's like, okay, that's great. Like
That's
small little tip.
good way to do it.
Yep. So
Also on that too large terrain piece is also like I mean, it's Star Wars, there's a lot of really cool team terrain, but often you see like a lot of starfighters or similar terrain that sometimes doesn't work very well as Legion terrain, or needs to be a part of a larger idea to make it work better, especially with silhouettes. If you have like a starfighter, you can shoot under it. Like it acts more like, even though it looks like it should be line of sight blocking terrain, it ends up acting more as like scatter terrain, because there's no way you can ever actually get LOS blocked behind it. So often like this giant U-wing table just basically had a bunch of stones piled under it, so that it turned it almost functionally into a hill rather than a starfighter. So there are ways around that kind of stuff, but make sure that like, especially if a terrain isn't just blocky buildings or big stones or whatever, like even like rounded huts and stuff need to be, because of the way silhouettes work, you need to make sure you take into account how sort of corner peeking works on various shaped terrain. And like when I'm building terrain, I actually prefer, even though it sometimes looks a little goofy or doesn't look quite as cool, have the like up to a silhouette height be fairly square shaped. And then after that, it can start doing crazy shapes. Like I have a lot of boulders I printed off where I made a lot of work in sort of making the first couple inches of them very straight edged. And then they go off into crazy shapes after that, just so that if you're on ground level, you have fairly workable terrain, even though it can still look good on the top.
Yeah, and I I'm a big fan of the non-uniform of every table. Like I don't want uniformity across all tables. And I think it's okay that maybe some tables have more line of sight and some have less. Not, I think that's okay, because I think we should be challenged to play in all different scenarios, and those have benefits and drawbacks for every list. So I'm a big fan of things being different. So, I hope when you're listening to this, you're not taking that as, okay, all my tables have to be this. And I know, I mean, I think there's a lot of opportunity there to do different stuff. And one thing, I don't know about you guys, but I don't see used a lot in real life is area terrain. And that was something coming out of Warhammer Fantasy, Kyle, same probably for you with 40K, where you would have like a little cut piece of cardboard with some trees on it, and that was area terrain, and it's just basically a cone that goes up, or a cylinder. And so I think using that a lot more, and having like tree areas that could be light or heavy cover, but you could see through them, they're just it's area terrain. Like I think utilizing those a lot more is something we as a community have to do. You don't see a lot of area terrain.
Yeah, but it's a really important part of a balanced table.
Yeah,
just like an important part of a balanced breakfast.
Another big pitfall you often see, especially like local terms and stuff, is like a giant piece of terrain or like a building right on the middle of the map, because it's sort of a very natural thing to just put a giant thing right in the middle of the map. The problem is with Legion, you have a lot of objectives that fall right in the middle, or you have it's a key position. So you often need to have your big thing off center. And then especially because key positions try to have a small-ish piece of something on or near the middle, so that if key position happens, it's a very obvious, relatively small piece of terrain that doesn't gonna advantage either side majorly.
Yeah, and that comes up a lot because of like anything like Sabine, for instance, that has jump 2, right? Like sometimes putting those pieces of terrain in the middle is, as a Sabine player now, I love, because I just jump up there and I grab the box and you can't do anything about it. And so, it's great for me, but for the game, yeah, you got, but that's the problem, right? Like a lot of people, when they're building these tables, like there was some tournament I went to that they put a big sand crawler like right in the middle of the table. And we were like, whoa, whoa, whoa.
That was PAX, I think.
Yeah, you gotta move that. You gotta move that. And
Yeah.
so, and then try, and I think it's just understanding if you're going to be a TO of an event just at your local store, or if there's some big convention, big-ish convention that's asking you to be a TO because you're the resident Star Wars Legion expert. I think just recognizing these different situations, and I think the table will still be beautiful if that sand crawler is like off to the side more, or is on the sides. I mean, I have a actual 2 scales Millennium Falcon that fits for this game. And remember, Kyle, we had it for like Northeast Open, I think. It's beautiful and it's great and it's cool to have on the table, but good God, does that suck to play with, And
I had so many judge calls on that table at Northeast Open.
And we learned the hard way, but we did, but this is what happens. We made these mistakes. So I'm coming at this from a place of, I've been there, man. Like I get it, and so like literally that Millennium Falcon just sits in the corner now because there's it's not good for it's not good for a table. Just stuff you learn as you're going along.
And sorry, go ahead.
Well, just to go off the center thing, it's okay to have like a pretty big line of sight blocker near the center of the table.
Yeah.
Just don't put it like smack dab in the middle.
Yeah.
And think about when you do that too, think about where the, deployment zones are. You kind of, I like to think of like corner to corner, right? Like the major offensive zones. That's where most zones are going to be sort of generally coming from.
Mm-hmm.
So if you have a big line of sight blocker, maybe put it along that other axis, the other diagonal axis, so that it's not like significantly closer to one person's major offensive corner.
I also, if you are going to put a small hill or something in the middle, there are ways to do that, but you need to make sure that like at minimum troopers can like difficult move up to the center of the map. Like there's the Imperial Train, like big temple piece that can actually fairly functionally work, like the big sort of stepped temple piece work as the center of the map. The key there is often make sure you have something satellite dish or something in the middle to be your key position. And then it can be like the middle box or whatever that falls in recover, for instance, can be accessed by troopers by moving, not having to climb or clamber.
Yeah, I think another pitfall that a lot of people fall into is making things symmetrical and balanced, and that's a big mistake too. Like you want variety, and you want different. Like I know in your head you're sitting there going, "Well, I want both sides to be even to both players," and it's like it's never going to work. A, the way you think it's going to work, and B, by doing that, you're creating a lot more headaches in like fire lanes and stuff like that than you're aware of, right? Like it's I understand, and when you're starting, it's a good idea, and you're like, I'm going to make everything balanced, but it just ends up becoming totally unbalanced because of fire lanes, because you're not really thinking through probably vehicles, you're not thinking through like all these other things and all the angles that you're gonna these two players are gonna be battling at.
Yeah, one thing, like you can make a balanced map without it being symmetrical. And it is important to try and make a balanced map, but also don't make it symmetrical. In your example, right, if you're going to give like one side an extra line of sight blocker, maybe make the other side like have a little bit more heavy scatter on that side.
Yeah.
than the one side that has like an extra line of sight blocker or
Right.
something like that. It's important to try and make a map balanced. As a person that has arranged a lot of terrain at tournaments and made invader maps and stuff, I've never successfully made balanced map, and I've tried to make everyone balanced. So if you're worried about like quote unquote preserving red player advantage, you're gonna do that by accident. Because making a balanced map is impossible unless you make it perfectly symmetrical, which you shouldn't do because that's boring.
Yep.
So try and make it balanced as much as possible. It's not going to be, you're still going to preserve that red player advantage. Don't worry. If you try and make a map that is not balanced, it's going to be like ridiculous in a way that's not fun for somebody.
Yeah.
Try and make a balanced map. Don't make it symmetrical. But yeah, it's just important to put thought into it. I know it's hard sometimes at, events where you got like 32 to 64 tables and you only have a couple judges, maybe. Like we get that there's, human limits. Yeah.
I mean, it is quite the thing to walk into a con with, oh, here's a room of tables and here's a giant pile of buckets of terrain. Go.
Yeah.
So it is, if you ever have the chance to sneak in early to a con to appreciate the setup and how hard it is to set up tables before the con. I got to stay at LVO and it is quite the process.
Yeah, it's a lot of work.
Oh God. And it's like, the problem is we're all very well intentioned, but sometimes those tables get designed by committee too. And so like if you end up going to a convention and there's a couple bad tables, there's going to be at every convention because we are all struggling to get 30 plus tables together, right? Just take it easy on the TO. They did the best that they could. And half of those, some of those weren't even built by them. They were built by staff because they were too busy doing other stuff. And some of them were built by committee and got over designed. And it just, there's a lot that goes into that. So, if you see some bad tables, just recognize that there's probably other ones that are really good and just be cool, and have if there's more than, if there's a lot of bad tables, just have a conversation one-on-one with the TO and just find out why. And then maybe if you have some suggestions, I think most TOs are open and to suggestions and looking at changes and stuff. So
I mean, especially after like round 1 or 2 of a big tournament, like often like don't overload the TO or the judges. And try to be respectful, especially if they're running around and trying to put on a good event, but especially if you're done early or whatever, and you notice like this one thing, it's like, oh, this piece of terrain was a way too good, or I didn't, whatever. Sometimes the judges, it's just because they didn't have enough time to like fully look over every scenario on every map, right? So if you say that to them politely, and especially like if you're done before everything's crazy right at the end of the round, they'll often come over and totally and might move the pieces around a little bit and be like, oh, I was actually supposed to be there, or no, that's a good idea. So, and especially round 1 or 2 of a long tournament where a little bit of good polite suggestions after round 1 will help 4 or 5 rounds of gaming later.
Yep.
Yeah, and a quick and easy thing to do just for TOs, if you have a multi-day tournament with cuts, and this doesn't even involve rearranging any terrain, though if you're ambitious, clearly you could do that. But just cut tables, right? Like if you've got a cut and you don't need all the tables for day 2, do a walkthrough and just quickly be like, okay, this is a bad table, not pairing on that one tomorrow. This is a good table, we're keeping that one, right? And it's basically just like a table triage, and you don't have to rearrange anything. You don't even really have to necessarily put any terrain away. But especially if you're just doing like a top 8 or top 4 cut and you only need like 4 tables, just go pick your 4 best tables and be like, all right, we're pairing on those tables, so.
And it can easily, like, especially like you can just rearrange placards. Like most tournaments have numbering systems on the tables. And especially if you're cutting down to 8 or whatever, just take your 1 through 8 and put them on your 8 best tables. And then when the pairings come out, it'll be, you're playing on table 1 through 8 and they'll go find them and play on them.
Yep. Yeah, it doesn't even require any rearranging of terrain. Just cut the bad tables, So yeah, and any other table arranging thoughts?
No, I think that's good.
Awesome.
I think we got him. I think we got him.
Yeah. All right. Should we quickly hit hobby?
Yeah. Let's do it.
Right. What have you guys been working on? You've been doing any hobby stuff lately?
Yeah, so I'm trying to currently I think I talked about this, I don't know, maybe months ago, but I want to have at least enough of every army in the studio here so that when people come over or when we're demoing or playing games that I can, that I can get units on the table. And so I'm trying to finish up my CIS army because that was the one I had the most completed. And I really only have about 4 units left. 2 of which being Magna Guard, and then just some like ancillary stuff that I want to get in there. So one of the things I'm trying to do differently, and this is the first time I've ever done this, and it could be a huge mistake. I don't know yet. But the Magna Guard, what I've done is I've already primed them, but I left them on all their sprues. And I've primed them, and then I'm going to try painting them on the sprues, then glue them together, and then do touch-up work and see if that does anything to the process. I don't know what it's going to do. I'm like, maybe it'd be easier to hold, see things, like move around the pieces if they're just in the sprue, and then and then touch up where the sprue's connected once I glue them all together. So that's my thing that I'm trying now. And I've gotten some really great inspiration. Rachel and I have been watching this TV show called Face Off, which is it's about making like movie prosthetics, like masks and like makeup and stuff for movies, and like it's a competition, it's a reality show. And so I've been learning so much about like their process and how they paint humans and like do all these like alien makeups and how they layer the paints and why they do certain things. Like for one there was someone was trying to do like a human like skin tone, and she was like explaining to while she's painting, like, well, listen, you have a lot of blood and stuff under here, so you can't just start with like a white or a gray. Like you should probably start with like a red or like a dark pink, and then build up on top of that, and that's going to give you a more full like color spectrum at the end. And I was like, oh, I bet you that would work while we're painting miniatures and stuff too. So that's been really inspiring, and a lot of cool things that they're doing that kind of echo how we do things with miniatures and terrain when we're hobbying. And I was like, oh right, yeah, so I could do that this way, when I'm doing a miniature or when I'm working on this. So that's been really great.
Yeah, actually, I took a painting class years ago at Nova Open, and the one thing that the guy said basically is anytime you're painting skin for a living creature, even if it's skin that's not like typical human colored flesh, if it's like an orc with green skin or if it's like some dragon with blue skin or whatever, you should always include red or pink as at a minimum like an undertone color, because red is like the color of life, right? So anytime you're painting a skin for a living creature, even if it's some weird color, always include some kind of red or pink somewhere in there. So that tracks with what you mentioned from that show.
Yeah, like we never talked about that before, right? And so that's a really cool, like, so that just must be a standard like technique, right, in art.
Yeah.
So that's really neat.
My local AOS group has started up in earnest again, so I've been painting some AOS stuff.
It's treason then.
My one thing, I mean, I haven't been painting too much, but I mean, school is busy right now, but I've been doing a lot of Stormcast, which means I've been playing around a lot of metallics, and GW contrast paints on top of metallics looks real good. Real
Interesting.
good.
I've heard that as a thing. I have yet to try it myself.
Yeah, I knew it, and then on one model I did like 3 different colors for like gemstones and like potions and stuff, and it looks real good. And especially like if you want to do like gems, if you do like a really bright silver metallic and then whatever color gem you want to do. GW also has like gem technical paints. We don't need to use those. I have one of them, but I just use contrast for other ones. And then you can also do like reds over gold like red contrast paint over gold metallics,
Ooh.
gives you a very warm, and like one of my things sort of looks like a potion is sort of what I did, but you can also make it look like warm gems or warm armor or whatever. So I don't know how applicable that is to Legion models. I can't, but like if you want to have like a bedazzled droid army, you want to do like
Yes, somebody
metallics with
needs to do
gems.
that.
And then my other hobby project is just a bunch of printing because I can spend a little bit of time to let my printer do its thing for a while. And I've sort of have two tables on the go. I'm sort of slowly putting the Naboo table together because I saw Nick Bodner's at LVO and got on a hobby horse. And then I'm also doing sort of like an Endor slash Kashyyyk slash nondescript forest type thing, but basically just got a whole bunch of STLs for trees and boulders, basically, and rocks, and just did a lot of CAD work to just move them around, adjust them a little bit. So I have a lot of individual things, and that's where I was playing around with the boulders. So that I have like some that are like basically area trained because I laid them flat and smushed them down, so they're like decently sized big bases that are just sort of rocky fields at this point. And then also ones that sort of stand up and are quite tall, like almost building size boulders. And then hopefully as summer rolls around, because I might airbrush those gray and then dry brush them, but I'm thinking I might just rattle can them because it'd be super quick outside to just lay them all out and then rattle can them all at the same time gray, and then just dry brush them up with big dry brushes. So we'll see. Those are my projects right now.
So I have done literally nothing with hobby since Adepticon. I had it was kind of a painting blitz to get my clones ready, which I don't know if I've ever talked about them on the show, but they're here. Of course, green screen can't see them.
Yep, sorry.
Sorry.
Wham, wham.
I actually did some of them with Ahsoka helmets. Let me find a good one. Can you see
Put it
that?
right in front of your face. Yeah, there you go. Yeah.
It's a little blurry. I may or may not have posted some pictures at some point. Anyway,
Put your hand behind it.
is that?
It just green screens it. Oh.
This is awful. No, we're
No.
really,
All right.
we're really
Anyway.
messing up.
Yeah, I tried the Ahsoka helmets on my phase 2s as like a squad marking. Because I tried to do 501st, which means that I wanted them all to at least be like white and blue.
Yeah.
But I'm also kind of obsessive about squad markings, especially with like clones, because they get intermixed a lot and you need to know who belongs to where. So I ended up doing like variations on the white and blue theme, like some guys with stripes on their shoulders that are gray and white. I have a naked clone squad who has no blue on them. They're just naked.
Rookies.
And yeah. And then I also have another squad that has orange on them, but not on the helmet. It's just like elsewhere. And the list I ran had 2 copies of Overwatch in it, and both Overwatch squads have orange on them. So that's what I always like reminded my opponents. I'm like, the important thing to remember with the squad marking is that the Overwatch squads are orange.
Yeah.
They're the only units on the table that are orange. Just a heads up, I'm not trying to like, trip you up with Overwatch. These are the two orange ones. The bright orange ones are the ones that have Overwatch. So yeah, it was really fun. I did the white with an airbrush, and then I did the rest freehand. White with an airbrush is like the only way to do white. I swear. I don't know how
I'm never going
ever did it with a normal brush. It's like torture.
Yeah, I think the AMG stream might have done it, and then I saw a YouTube video where they used the makeup sponges, and they started with like gray, and then they did like a light gray with the makeup sponge, and like just getting like all the like highlighted areas, and then did the white. I might try that with the clones when I get to that, just to test it out, because you're right, dude. Painting white is literally the worst. It's worst.
Horrible. Yeah. The only thing worse is yellow. I don't know if you've ever painted yellow, but yellow is actually worse than white, slightly.
Yeah, I mean, my clones, because some of them were for the rattle can way back in the day, and now I'm started doing them with the airbrush, and like to the naked eye from afar, you can't really tell the difference, but you get them up close, and it's very obvious which ones are rattle can and which ones are airbrush.
Yeah. And then I just want to talk about basing because I actually I had a lot of fun with these bases. They're super simple. I don't know if can you see that?
Oh
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah,
Like
so it's
Felucia.
yeah, kind of. It's
Mhm.
so they have there's like jungle tufts, which I use for my droids, which are green, but they have essentially it's the same thing, but they're I think they're called alien tufts, but you can get them in like these crazy pink and purple and bright orange and bright green colors.
Mhm.
Um, and then I just did one of the texture paints, one of the GW texture paints. I think granite, whatever that
Astro Granite.
Astro Granite.
It's
Yeah,
Astro
that's it.
Granite and Astro Debris, I think. Are the
Yeah,
two.
yeah. So I just did that. I did like a purple wash over it, and then I dry brushed it gray and then white to get like this sort of like purpley algae fungus feel situation, and then I just glued the tufts on them, and that's it.
Yeah.
That's all I did.
Umbara-esque.
So yeah, um, I couldn't find anything. Ambara has those cool like tentacle plants.
Yeah.
I couldn't find anything like that. I would have thought maybe GW had something like that, but I couldn't find anything.
I do know that there's STLs for like
Yeah.
Felucian plants that exist, but
Mm.
I'm sure at some point someone with modeling skill will make some Baran plants, but
Yeah,
not
and
this day.
I think I think they said on stream that the 501st Battle Force thing that they're doing is supposed to be like Umbara themed, so I wouldn't be surprised if
I mean, the Imbara arc in the Clone Wars show is very crucial to the 501st development. So
yes, very much. And ironically, Anakin's absent for that entire arc.
yes.
Yeah. Anyway, yeah, so it's super simple. My droids are similar. It's just like GW is not the only one that makes these basing paints. You can get them from other companies too, but basically it's just like basing paint.
Yeah.
Wash, dry brush the basing paint, glued grass tufts to it. It looks great. That's all you have to do.
It's really easy.
Yeah.
You can there are, so like if you go to any hobby store like a Hobby Lobby or like a Michael's or AC Moore or any of those, you can actually get the acrylic paints. They have like mattes and mediums and stuff that you can get that create similar effects, and you could just mix your own. Like I've done that as well, and like they have like sandy gritty ones that I'll mix with like brown paint to create dirt, or like tan, to create like sand, or they have like a stucco type paint that drives all so you can do that and just mix whatever colors you want in with that too. So that's another way, and you could get big bottles of that for like $9 at these hobby
super
stores.
cheap.
Yeah, the GW stuff is definitely not the cheapest.
It's expensive,
but because it's great.
Yeah,
it is amazing.
It's also because, especially for Legion armies, where you don't actually need that much basic material. Like GW, like because they usually come in pairs.
Yeah.
Like so, it'll be like one effect and the other effect. So if you have like a bottle of each, it usually does a Legion army quite easily with just the 2 bottles. So it's still not the cheapest thing, but like if you're doing all your minis across all armies, whatever, the same, then those bigger bottles definitely worth it. But for me, I do all my armies in different bases, so the small bottles are totally fine for me.
I'm regretting, by the way, doing my armies in different bases now that Shadow Collective is going to be a thing.
Same.
I'm like, because I currently have Bosk based in my Empire basing scheme, which is like different than my other 3.
Yep.
And I'm like, okay, they've told us that he'll potentially be usable in droids now too. How do I base him? Like, what do I do here?
I mean, my Wookiees, because they're in Rebels and Clones.
Same
and
problem with Wookiees.
My Rebel scheme is Stowe, and my Clone scheme is Desert, and those are not the same biomes.
Nope. Yeah, not close. Yeah, my Rebels is Crate, like the salt planet with the red dirt. And my Clones is what I just showed you, was just that Felucia thing. Not close. Yeah. So I have 3 Wookiee units, and I'm like, if I bring these to a tournament and use them as Republic Wookiees, like what am I gonna do? I don't know.
I mean, my problem too,
I guess,
because I just sort of took a knife to the base, and my one spot I had painted up with my Rebel scheme, but they're painted like very gray and like with white markings because it's supposed to be like, oh, they're a little frosty, and now they're in the desert.
Well, you guys got to do like what I do. Every unit has different basing, so then it
There you
doesn't
go.
matter.
Yeah.
I am thinking about though, with the clones when I paint that army, that I'm gonna do one base across all the clones, just because I haven't done that. I've done different basing on every different unit, and sometimes I wish they were more cohesive. So I might do that. But
Especially if you're doing them white, the basing really stands out.
yeah,
Which is partly why I did the Felucia, because it's super colorful and it looks nice underneath the white. But yeah, I think that's a good idea for clones if you're doing white, is to make them a consistent basing scheme.
yeah.
Also, also turns out desert looks pretty good against the white.
It does.
Like
Yeah.
the sort of warm browns.
Yep.
Yeah, or whatever that planet that everybody Geonosis.
Yeah,
that everybody-
Geonosis,
Yeah,
yep.
Geonosis.
Well, and the nice thing about doing desert schemes for Star Wars is two of the most iconic planets, Geonosis and Tatooine, are both the same
They're
biome.
both. Yep. Geonosis is not like quite desert. It's more like
Yeah, they're
Or like Mars desert.
Yeah, Geonosis has the red dirt.
Yep.
Tatooine is more traditional desert, but
Right.
you can kind of fudge it and say they're both
Yeah,
the same.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, close enough. All right. Speaking of Shadow Collective, before we sign off here, did you guys talk about the card list that they released at all?
Because we didn't know what any of them were, so we were just like, eh.
Well, yeah. I mean, we don't need to like speculate
Yeah.
what some of the cards do. I think the important takeaway for me is last time I was on, we were talking about like, what do I buy?
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's two takeaways from that card list. The first is that there doesn't appear to be anything unique in the expansion packs versus the core set.
Right.
By that I mean the unit expansion packs. The second thing is the card pack. I forget what the official title of the card pack
Card
is.
pack 2.
Card pack 2. Okay. Not the thing that has like the objective tokens and the battle cards in it.
No.
The upgrade card pack or whatever. Yeah. Card pack 2. That has cards that are not in the core set.
Yep.
Specifically like the bounty hunter mercenary cards and stuff like that. So if you want to play the bounty hunters, you'll need, it's only like $12 or something. But those cards are not in the core set, so you'll need one of those. So my question is, do I need the expansion packs if I'm just buying a bunch of core sets? The answer is no. Do I need the card pack if I'm buying a bunch of core sets? The answer is yes. So
yeah, and I think the expansion packs, I think you're going to need them eventually, because I think at some point you're going to be like, oh, I want to run another set of Mandalorians, or I want to do that, but until and you get them in your hands and actually start playing them, right? Like two to three core sets should do you.
Yeah. I feel also like the card pack, I do like that I actually kind of like that they did that, because it means for people who have bounty hunters and don't want to actually buy into the rest of Shadow Collective, $12 and you're good to go.
Yep. If you just want to play your Empire bounty hunters like you normally would, just buy the card pack. I still do not own Boba Fett. I think I'm gonna have to rectify that.
Come on, dude.
My Empire stuff is like Darth Vader / Palpatine focused. So I need to work on my physical Empire models. That's my next hobby goal before Atlantic City, is to get, because they're like an embarrassing 3-color standard. I think I said this on a previous cast, but that's going to be my next hobby goal.
3-color standard is not embarrassing. That is the minimum.
Yeah, no, it's.
So you know what? You want to know real quick before we sign off? I'll tell you. You know what my next big hobby goal is, and I think I'm going to combine this into a couple different things. But have you guys played Fallen Order, Jedi Fallen Order at all? The video game? Okay, so the planet Zepho. That was the one that had like the snow, and it was like the cool little like ancient town and stuff, and it had like snow and grass in the mountains. I want to build that table. Like I want to design a mat. I want to do the table. Like I want to do the whole thing. Like I don't know why I was playing. I played that game for I beat the game recently, but that was the first time I played it. And man, dude, I didn't know how good that game was. Like, I know everybody was talking about it,
That's
but
good.
I find sometimes with this community, like everything's great and it's hard to like weed through what I should actually spend my time on. And so, this was one of those things where I was like putting it off and then I'm like, you know what? I'm gonna sit down when I have some free time, and I absolutely loved it. And in particular, the Zepho planet really spoke to me, and I was like, oh, this would be a cool Legion board, so I'm gonna give it a shot.
Nice.
Yeah, that's a cool biome.
My big hobby project is to reduce my piles of shame to maybe one pile of shame, because I went through it all and separated it into the armies so that they weren't quite as big. But I now have like 5 different piles of shame.
Yep.
Yeah, and I'm gonna need some pile of shame space for Shadow Collective. So
yeah. Oh, that'll be a 6th pile of shame.
Yeah. No, I'm in the same boat. I have a ton of badly painted Empire stuff, and then I have a bunch of like unpainted Republic stuff still, like the Barks, Yoda, some Wookiees, and then I have some. I still haven't painted the new droid releases. I've got 2 boxes of Magna Guards and a super tactical droid that I haven't painted yet. So yeah, that's my current pile of shame. Once I get through the Empire, once I plow through the Empire stuff, it'll be like manageable. But then Shadow Collective is going to come out. That's going to be bad again.
Dude, I was thinking that same thing. Like, because I'm looking at so like I said, I'm almost done with droids, right? I'm pretty good on Empire and Rebels, just because I've been playing them, so I've been painting things up. But like, I'm looking over here, going, okay, I got those, and then I'm like, oh god, Shadow Collective's coming out in a few months. Like, I'm never going to catch up.
Yep.
It's crazy.
Yeah. So that's my goal, is to be as caught up as possible before that comes out, so that I have actual pile of shame space for Shadow Collective. Because those models look amazing, but also be very labor intensive to paint.
Yep.
It's not like droids or clones where you can do the primary coat with an airbrush and then just go in and do the details. There's lots of like cloth and robes and leather and
very fine detail,
alien faces, and I mean like they look amazing.
Oh, they look awesome.
Yeah, that's not going to be a quick paint situation.
I mean, even the Mandalorians, which are probably the easiest paint in some ways, but even those, because like they have the spiky helmets, so suddenly you have flat metal Beskar with spikes on them that you have to like pick out,
and you've got all the different, it's not quite like painting Sabine, but you have, like they all have different patterns on them in the red and the black and the different so it's even though you're painting armor, it's still like differently patterned armor.
I mean, I have a lead belcher Sabine, it's fine.
No, it isn't. I'm actually quite proud of my Sabine. That's a model that I haven't had much of a chance to bust out, but I even did like the checkerboard thing on her shoulder pad.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. And the wings on the back and the jetpack. Yeah.
Look at this guy.
That one. I've been doing 40K for a long time, so I like the freehand is fun if you're not doing it repeatedly. If you're just doing it on like one model, freehand is fun.
I mean, I've started to do some freehand, like when on my clones. I was doing individual insignia and stuff, and that was the first like true freehand I'd started to do, and it's interesting.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, I only did 5 Ahsoka helmets. That's all I'm gonna say.
Yeah, I mean, I did my first freehand ever was my super tack, and I did a super like swirly design on him. And after that, I was like, I can do this, and then went 12 clones later, I don't want to do more of this.
It's great. It's great for like character models or things that you're only going to do one time, and that's it.
Yeah. It's also nice to not have a pattern to actually have to follow, because it's like, oops, slip. Well, that's part of my pattern now.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah, that's the great thing about like I played 40 orcs for 40K.
Yeah.
And their whole thing is just like they all have to look different from each other. So you mess up, it's like, oh yeah, that's this guy's thing. He's got a slanty checkerboard pattern instead of, like.
Yeah, I did that Kraken and Kalani. I was I was trying to do the little detail paint, and like the one side I'm like, man, killer. I crushed it. And then I'm like going to do the other side, I'm like rap, and I'm like, oh, son of a like I don't have time for this.
And yeah, as someone like I was trying to do when I was painting my signs, I was trying to do my bad, like generally you have a good side and a bad side when you paint. Just because the way right, how dominant hand, I was trying to do the bad side first, so that whatever I did, I could match it.
Like, oh, that's a good idea. Yeah.
That's good thinking.
Just because, like, and especially like I have a fairly injured hand, so some movements just don't happen. So I try to do it on my bad side first, so that I can like, oh yeah, that's not gonna happen. So then I just do it and then match it on the good side. And,
oh yeah, that's a good idea.
That's a great idea. All right. Any final thoughts, gentlemen?
Oh man, I'm good.
All right. Good luck to
nice smooth landing. It's just
good luck to everyone playing an Invader.
Yeah. We're doing
I dropped the game, so I don't know if I talked about that, but I need to. I'm 3-1, so I think if I win one more, then I should be in decent shape to make it out of group stage. But
Kyle was the first fifth trooper to drop a game.
I was. Yep.
It wasn't me. It wasn't me.
Yeah.
I mean, I was the second.
I mean, I'm still only 3-0, so I still have 2 more games to drop. But
is it just you and me, Jay, out of the 6 or 7 that have actually
so
lost
far?
the game?
Yeah.
Okay.
But I will say my bracket is much more cut and dry, so I think I'm for sure going into the next round.
Yeah.
So
mine is one of those weird situations where you could end up with like a 3-way 4-1 tie.
Oh yeah.
And then it gets super awkward because like everybody's beaten somebody else in that 3-way tie, and then because head to head is the first tie break, but then you have to go to victory points, and it's like it gets weird. I hope we don't end up in that situation.
And Kyle does not like victory point ties.
No, I don't. I've actually, not by my choice, but I've had I think 3 of my 4 games have been on VAPs. And in one of those, I actually managed to like assault my opponent's VAP because he only had like 4 models left by the end of the game and scored a victory point. But in the other ones, they were 4-4 ties. So I have 1 victory point right now with 3 wins.
I mean, just a quick side too. My last game was a hostage game, and I had a very easy like run away and hide like 2-2 win.
Yeah.
But I decided as soon as my hostage was safe enough, I went and got his objective. So, and it didn't actually end up grabbing it. So it ended up being 2-0, but that's 2 points on the board for me in case there's a weird tie or something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that is the thing
I wasn't really in a good position to do that, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But yeah, we'll see. Hopefully it doesn't come to that. The game that I lost to Captain Cook, who's currently 3-0 in our group. He's running like an Iden tactical strike plus do back situation.
So it's good.
Yeah. And Palpatine was in a spot he shouldn't have been in, but he was 0 for 6 on saves. It was like, I got a medic, I've got protector up. Like I'm good. I was not good.
That was 6 more saving rolls you then should have been thrown.
Exactly. Yes, I should not have been making like there was a way that I could have done it where I didn't have to make any saves, and that's what I should have done. So that's definitely not I always say like you should just take the dice out of the equation if possible. That was a situation where there was like a way where I could have taken the dice out of the equation. I didn't, and they punished me for it. So Captain Cook's a good player. He saw the opportunity. Pro tip: if you're facing Palpatine, the way to beat Palpatine is to shoot Palpatine. It's not rocket science. All of his wounds are important. Yes, he has protector and medics, but like, those 3-up saves fail occasionally, and when they do, they're very important for Palpatine. So, even if he survives, I think I was going back like, even if he rolls average and he makes 4 of those 6 saves, right? There was a medic, so he's.
If he died on 6, he would have had 2 wounds on him at that point.
Right. Yeah. Then he's only got basically 2 wounds available for a now you will die. Like that's not a good a now you will die. That's a bad one. Like that still would have been real bad if he just rolled average there and took 2 wounds instead of 6. So yeah.
Yep.
Anyway,
this was a long final thoughts.
It was. Yep. You're right. I'm sorry. we talked about because last week Jay and Lucas and John went and talked about their Invader games so far, and I hadn't done that yet. So we were like, Kyle should talk about his Invader thing, and then we got all the way to the end, and I'm like, I didn't do that. So
Yep.
there you go.
Well, if you stayed this long, a little treat for you.
Yeah.
Or punishment, depending on how you see it.
Yeah. So I'm taking it one game at a time and hoping to avoid the dreaded three-way tie.
Oh, yeah.
We'll see. All right. Well, we are the Notorious Scoundrels. I'm Kyle.
I'm Jay.
I'm Timbo.
Stay fresh, cheese bags.